So we have Bob Boeckman next.
I'm Bob Boeckman. I was a postdoc in the Stork group from 70 to 72, and I think I'm going to briefly relate a story that I think sort of tells you a lot about Gilbert's focus on chemistry. This story starts with, and those of you who knew him, with Tony Paneras. Tony was an undergraduate at Columbia, and he became well acquainted with all of the science departments during that time. And then he migrated, or eventually after graduation, entered the PhD program and ended up working with Gilbert. And we had our group meetings on Wednesdays, I believe, at noon. And so the tradition of the group was to acquire food, usually at a local deli, Mama Joy's at the time, and bring back that food to the room, and we would eat during the talk. And it was traditional that Stork would show up, typically 10 minutes late. The meeting would already have begun, and one of the students who was designated to talk would be up at the board already engaged. And there would be this chairs left in front for him, and he would come in, and next to that chair was a sandwich. Because they would always ask him earlier in the day before they went down to the deli, what do you want for lunch? Can we get you anything? He'd say, get me anything, I don't care. So Paneras decided to take that literally and acquired a frozen bullfrog from the biology book, which they dutifully took to Mama Joy's and had wrapped up like a sandwich. And this sandwich was deposited by his place at the next group meeting. Between bread, looked just like any other sandwich. And the group was pretty much aware of what was going on, because Tony couldn't keep a secret from the group anyway. And so Gilbert would come in typically, and he would sit down and immediately focus on the board and start listening to the talk. And then he'd unwrap his sandwich, and he'd eat it, and he literally never looked at what he ate. Not even a glance. And so this day, he came in, and he wasn't, he's a creature of habit. He came in, sat down, unwrapped this sandwich, and I think the entire group was sitting there. I think there was a collective, everyone held their breath because they didn't know quite what was going to happen. But anyway, he brought this sandwich up literally to his mouth, I think, and stopped. He didn't take a bite. And I don't know whether it was the smell of the bullfrog or what, but at that point, everybody just burst into laughter, and the joke was over. But that's just very typical. Stork thought that was the greatest thing, that they had pranked him like that. It was just amazing. The other very short story I'll tell is a story that I came from Jim Hendrickson's lab at Brandeis. And Jim was a very hands-off advisor. And actually, in my last year of graduate school, he went off to do a sabbatical in Africa. And he basically left me, a fourth-year graduate student, in charge of his laboratory. And so, about shortly into this sojourn, I was approached by an undergraduate who asked, could he work in the group for Professor Hendrickson? And I said, well, it would be a little difficult because Hendrickson was in Africa. And he says, I don't care. I said, can I work in the group anyway? And he said, well, I guess so. So we signed him up, and I started him off on a project, my project. So I arrived at Columbia. We didn't quite finish that project. And I arrived at Columbia, and after a couple months, I had a meeting with Professor Stork, and I decided, well, let's see what would happen. So I asked him a key question. I said, I have this little project that I started and I'd like to finish. What would you think of the idea that I work on it in my spare time? The answer was very succinct and almost immediate. What spare time? Thank you.